Hello there, and welcome to episode 8 of the VictorPrep Vocab podcast. It's another wonderful and lovely day in Southern California, and let's start with going over the previous episode's words. Those were demure, debutante, propitiate, and toady. That's demure, debutante, propitiate, and toady. So the drill is the same as always. Hopefully you've remembered those words, but I'm going to go over them now. And if you are having trouble remembering, please listen to the podcast again, and especially go through your example sentences, think up some new sentences. That's how you really drill the meaning into your brain. So, demure, that means to make an objection, especially if you think something is morally wrong. So you've taken exception to something, you think something is wrong, because you have doubts about it. You have some moral scruples. Debutante, that is a young woman, usually upper class, perhaps wealthy, and she's making her first appearance in society. She's making her debut into society. That is a debutante. Propitiate. Propitiate means to win the favor of someone. Often in literature, that could be a god or a spirit. Often, if you use it in modern day, it will be a person. So you do something nice for someone, do something good to someone to win their favor, or often to regain their favor. So you may have angered someone and you want to make them happy again, so you do something nice to them. And final word from last time was toady. And a toady is a person who behaves very overly friendly, overly nice to someone important. They're almost doing too much because they want something. And it's a rather negative word. So being a toady is not a good thing, usually. So when that word is used in literature, in novels, or in speech, it often implies something negative. Those were our words from last time. Let's go on and learn some new ones. Our 4 new words are bombastic, impermeable, jargon, and sardonic. Let's start with bombastic. So, bombastic is spelled B-O-M-B-A-S-T-I-C. Bombastic. Bombastic means, and this is almost always about a speech or someone talking. A bombastic speech or bombastic talk is talk that has very high intentions, is very high sounding, very pompous perhaps, or inflated. Perhaps you could call it pretentious. But despite its being high sounding, it has, when it comes down to it, very little meaning. It's perhaps a little empty. It's overinflated. Often you might hear politicians talking in very high terms, very inflated terms about their goals, but in fact it's all hot air. When I think of bombastic, I think of bomb or explosion, because bombastic implies a certain energy or a theatricality that is too much for the content of the speech or the occasion. If you imagine a man giving a speech about the opening of his restaurant, and in his speech he's talking about how his restaurant is going to improve humanity and help people, and he's giving this big pompous speech, but then it turns out all he's doing is opening a McDonald's. That would be an example of a bombastic speech. He's giving this inflated, pompous speech, but it's only for the opening of a McDonald's. That would be the example of a bombastic speech. My example sentence is, I watched the election coverage on TV recently, but I got a little tired of the bombastic speeches given by the average politician. Our next word is impermeable. That's spelled I-M-P-E-R-M-E-A-B-L-E, impermeable. This is quite a simple one. It simply means not allowing liquid to pass through, or fluid to pass through. It also has a secondary meaning, which is a bit different, but still similar. And that means not liable to be affected by pain or distress. Perhaps you know someone who, no matter what happens, they stay calm. You could perhaps call them impermeable. Or my example would be, I had this friend in high school called Nick, who seemed impermeable to pain. He used to get his hand and smash his knuckles on the side of our tables, and it didn't seem to bother him at all. He showed no sign of pain. He was impermeable to pain. Most people have heard of the words impassable or impossible. So im or in at the start of the word often means not something. So impermeable means not permeable. To be permeable means something can pass through it. So impermeable means not be able to pass through it. So if you know permeable or impassable, impassable means can't pass through, then impermeable should be quite easy to remember. Our third word is jargon. That is spelled Jargon. Jargon. Now, jargon is the language or the words someone uses that are particular to a certain trade or a certain job or even a group. So, whatever job you do, or maybe the place where you're from, you may have certain words or certain language that you use as part of that group. And that is jargon. So if you go to hospital, you'll hear doctors and nurses talking about things and perhaps not understand them. They are using a certain jargon that's particular to the medical world. I'm a software engineer for my job, and often it seems we talk only in jargon and acronyms, and sometimes it seems our conversations consist wholly of jargon. Jargon can also mean any speech or writing that you don't really understand. It could also mean gibberish or meaningless talk that obviously you don't understand because there is no meaning. Our fourth word is sardonic. That's spelled Sardonic. Sardonic. Sardonic is almost always used to refer to a person, and in particular how that person behaves. So, if someone is sardonic, they are characterized by a certain kind of bitter or scornful mocking. If you know someone who's often very sarcastic or cynical and in an almost nasty way, then you could perhaps describe them as being sardonic. Often you might imagine someone who's quite intelligent and looks down on other people. And perhaps when he sees someone make a mistake, he has a sort of nasty little laugh at them. That could perhaps be called a sardonic laugh. Now, what's quite interesting is there is a particularly cool origin for this word. It turns out that the origin of the word is Greek, coming from the place called Sardinia. Now, apparently, there was a plant in Sardinia which, when eaten, was supposed to produce convulsive laughter ending in death. So, sardonic has this origin of both laughter and death, which makes sense because it does have a negative tone about it, sardonic. Usually if someone is described as sardonic, it's not a positive thing. My example sentence for this word was, "My cynical coworker distances himself from other people with his nasty sardonic laughter." Those are our 4 words for today, and as usual, I'm going to give you 4 sentences that in some way refer to the words of today, and I want you to listen to the sentence and think about what word I'm referring to. And as always, please think of some sentences that use the words. I know I always talk about this, and it probably is getting annoying by now, but it's only because it really is so important. And if you're going to learn the words, and if they're going to stay in your brain, you have to use them yourself. Even use them during the day. So if you listen to this podcast in the morning, try and use those words during the day. Try and find a time when they're particularly appropriate. Here are our 4 sentences. I went to see a politician speak with high hopes of being inspired. However, despite appearing to have lofty intentions, the speech was hollow and empty at its core. It can be a little scary when you're in the hospital and hear the doctors and nurses talking, but without really understanding the conversation. They use a lot of complex terminology and scientific-sounding words. I had a teacher in college who often made the students feel bad with his blunt sarcasm and mocking tone. If you go diving in very cold water, It's often better to wear a dry suit rather than a wetsuit, because a dry suit acts as a watertight barrier, allowing the wearer to stay dry and warm. Those are our 4 sentences. I hope you got which word I was referring to in each of them. That is episode 8 of the VictorPrep Vocab podcast. Thank you very much for listening. It's a pleasure, as always. And as always, I welcome any feedback you have. Please email me at sam.fold@gmail.com or Twitter @samfold. I am setting up a website right now. It's going to be at VictorPrep.com. Right at the moment, there's nothing much there, but I am building a website. So I will put up any notices about the podcast there. I will advertise new episodes there and so on, just to make it a bit easier to follow any changes or anything that's going on. I really hope you're enjoying learning some new words and that this is actually working and you're remembering them. I am going to make a big test episode coming up. I think at 10 episodes, I'm going to have an episode of the podcast where I test people on the first 40 words. And I think every 5 or 10 episodes from then on, I'm going to have tests, because I think it's so important to repeat our learning to really make sure that it's driven into our brains and we won't ever forget. So thank you so much. I really love that there are some people out there who are listening to this and it's helping them. And I will speak to you next time.